English class. You probably all were tortured by the forced reading of Beowulf, just like I was. And I don't know, I was a geeky high school kid, you know, I was like Hermione in the front row with my hand up in the air, and the teacher just got tired of me and let me go off and kind of do my own thing. So I've been interested in Mead since 1980 when I was 5 years underage. And the teacher just kind of let me go off and do a little extra research about Mead, and I don't know, I just kind of read about it and thought it sounded pretty good, and it was probably a good 10 years before I finally actually found a glass of Mead. And that odyssey included failed trips to Renaissance fairs that only served Budweiser and Coors Light, and just all kinds of wacky adventures. Finally, in about 1997, in Hillsboro, I lived right in downtown Hillsboro. There's a little homebrew store there called Main Brew, and I just wandered in one day, not really intending to homebrew anything, and I saw a book about mead making, and so I asked, where do you get a decent mead? And their answer was, there are no good commercial meads in the United States. All the good meads are homebrewed. So if you want good mead, you have to make it yourself. So in 1997, I started making mead, and haven't stopped. Lots of other things have happened, but in 2009, we finally got a winery license, and so we've been selling mead commercially since 2009. And then this past Thanksgiving, well, actually just a little bit before that, I learned that in Oregon, if you have a winery license and a licensed tasting room, you actually can sell not only your own mead, but anybody else's mead or wine or beer. And then I thought, this is awesome, right? Now I've been like shopping for mead for 20 years, and my husband just kind of rolls his eyes and looks at the checkbook register, right? But now, like, I get to stock a mead tasting room. So it's basically like licensed to go shopping for mead. And so now we have 100 genre, right? And just like beer can be everything from Budweiser to Guinness Stout to Belgian Lambics, fruit beers, sour beers, pumpkin beers, spice beers. Well, it's Portland, so like we all know there's hundreds of them. Mead also has this broad spectrum of possible flavors. So just with what I have in my tasting room, there are meads from 5.8% alcohol to 22% alcohol, which I really would consider gratuitous levels of alcohol, but that's how they make it in Denmark. Sparkling and still, and by sparkling we have Méthode Champenoise meads that absolutely compare favorably with any $35 or $45 bottle of champagne you want to put next to it, down to very light session meads that are less than 10% alcohol and are force carbonated with carbon dioxide and are $7 a package. So, and we have meads that sell for from $6.80 to $69 a bottle. You can have any manner of fruit added to the honey as an additional source of fermented sugar. So right now at our farm we have meads that have mango, apricot, peach, blueberry, blackberry, choke cherry, marionberry, huckleberry, raspberry, fig, and I'm certainly leaving several out. We have meads that people make with lavender in them, with rose petals in them, chili peppers, habanero peppers, vanilla and cinnamon sticks. I mean, there's just an incredible range of flavors. Many of them are barrels, bourbon barrels.
How do you accomplish that? You just let it ferment longer and it gets less and less sugar? Is that
Great question. There are a couple of dials that you have for that. One is how much sugar you start out with at the beginning. So essentially, to make honey, you take honey, which is a very stable product, and really won't ferment on its own, and dilute it with water. So the more water you put in the mix proportionally, the lower your starting bricks or starting down here, the lower your potential for alcohol is. point that you can bottle even if it didn't finish. With one honey, or you can blend honeys. This mead is a blend honey. I believe this one has clover and alfalfa. I'm not 100% sure, but I know it's a blend of two different honeys. So you can blend different honeys. And then you've got all the different yeast flavors and all the different fruit flavors and all the different spice and herb flavors. And really you have an infinite number of combinations that you can create.
How many do you make on the farm?
Right now for sale I just have one, which we'll taste this evening too. I have 2 additional ones in process, and I've probably made, I'm going to guess 50 or 60 different meads on a homebrew scale over the years.
How are the meads decanted? I noticed this was a can. Do they come in bottles and cans, and are they different? When you buy,
Can only this brand, Redstone, and a brand that's made in Eugene. Virtually everybody uses bottles, but people use all different bottle styles. Some are in beer bottles, some are in swing top bottles, some are in regular wine bottles, and some are in champagne bottles. So again, there's this wide range of styles. Different mead makers choose different bottles to present it.
do you ever buy mead in like a barrel system where you bring your own in and you fill it?
There's just starting to be some of that. There are a very few around town that have a couple of meads on tap, but I think like ciders, we'll see a big increase in that in the next few years. Yes, ma'am?
In addition to the honey nose that we were supposed to pick up immediately, is there anything in this particular one that you think we should really be able to pull out? Or
The other thing that I would encourage you to try to notice is the hops. So the hops are present both as an aroma, kind of a spicy floral aroma like the aroma that's in beer, and it's also present as a bitterness. And I think that makes it very food friendly. I don't know how many people are still nibbling on chips and salsa or hummus and pita chips, but I actually suspect that this would go pretty well with both of those things.
Yeah, like you, I became interested in mead through tales from the 1500s kind of thing, but I'm really disappointed that the mead field seems to be trying to position.
You tell them what you're trying to do with your mead recipe, and they'll put a recipe together that'll get you right where you want to be.
Are there different styles, like in beer, stout, and porter, and all that stuff? And is there, like, a lot of beers have their imitation of the European styles, which all developed because of the different countries and everything? Is there inspiration like that?
Absolutely. In fact, that to me was like one of the most, that was the hook for me that pulled me in, is every culture on the planet has made mead at some point in the past. So wine grapes have a pretty tight latitudinal belt that they thrive in. And hops have a pretty narrow latitudinal band that they thrive in. But honeybees are everywhere. And so honey is everywhere. And historically, honey would have been the highest sugar hit that you could get as a hunter-gatherer. Wild grapes don't ripen all at once, so they ripen over a period of several weeks. You can't just harvest everything and make a big batch of wine. Like your rose petals that you were telling me about, you have to queue them up, but there's no refrigeration to store them, right? So, I mean, when you really look at it, mead had to have been the first alcohol that was made. So if you plant a vineyard, right, you already have a plan. I mean, it takes a long time to plant and take care of a vineyard before you get any grapes, right? So if you're planting a vineyard, you know how to make mead. And you're looking for a cost and convenience savings. You've already got a market, the root word of mead is so old in the Proto-Indo-European original language that in modern Hindi, the word for honey is madhu. It's a cognate of mead. So something as far away as India and Germanic languages and Romance languages all have the same root word for mead and honey. And I just think it's the most beautiful, unifying, amazing thing. But everybody made it a little differently. Because everybody's honey everybody's other palettes of things were different. Different fruits, different spices, different adjuncts to put in. Everybody's native yeast was different. Everybody's cuisine was different, so they would make it with different alcoholic strengths and different flavor components to balance their own cuisine. So there's this very rich palette of styles, which actually is why our meadery is called KOOKOOLAN World Meadery, because I'm a soup du jour mead maker kind of girl, so I dabble in meads from everywhere. Sorry, you really
what countries have you borrowed styles from, or?
I've dabbled in African style tej meads. I've dabbled in Polish Dołyszniak style meads, which are much tighter, so equal parts honey and water, which gets you above 24 bricks, which gets you into very high teens alcohol production. I've made English style low alcohol meads. There's a recipe, so there's a 1600s book that was found in a cupboard called The Closet of Sir Somebody Digby Opened, and it's all these mead recipes from like a contemporary of Shakespeare. So there's this mead that he made for Queen Elizabeth that's low alcohol with some bay leaves in it and some rosemary, and that was delicious. There's just so many.
Wow.
How do you pick? Yes.
Do you see as much variety in honey as you do in other fermentables, like grains?
You see more. What a great question. I love that question. Wildflower honey. It's one word, 2 words, right? But I mean, it's one label for a product. But man, spring honey from Hawaii, fall honey, we don't. So the day my husband mentioned in passing that he used to professionally keep bees in Iran, I was like, and you keep bees? And he's like, no. So my husband's from Iran, and so after the Islamic Revolution, it was bad not to be Muslim. Right? And so he worked a lot of odd jobs, and one of those was keeping bees, not for himself, for another family, and it was a night job, moving hives from one orchard to another, carrying 80-pound hives, and getting crawled on and stung. So basically he said, no, we're not doing that.
Never
So we
again.
buy honey. I have neighbors who keep bees, and that's just fine. We should pour another mead. So just to illustrate the point of adding other flavors to it, you probably won't like this one all that much. This is a chocolate cherry mead. Oops, no, the other one, made in Chicago. This is from Wild Blossom Meadery in Chicago. They make a huge array of meads, mostly fruity and sweet meads. You know those chocolate cherry candies that you can get at Christmas? This kind of reminds me of those. But this past, so February is National Cherry Month, and so at our tasting room last weekend, we had all the cherry meads on special for tasting and at 20% off. I wasn't sure until we set them out, but I have 7 different cherry meads in the tasting room right now. And some are dry, some are higher in honey, and some are higher in cherry, so you have different ratios of honey to fruit. The real strong cherry dry ones come across to me as like being a nice pairing for pork tenderloin with dried cherries and rosemary kind of thing. The lighter, sweeter ones almost taste more like a cherry pie, where they'd be good with vanilla ice cream. So even within one flavor category, you get a really broad range. There's just a lot of dials that a mead maker can turn. Any comments about this mead? It's like candy, right? Like you serve in a glass.
Yeah, but tart candy.
For commercial mead makers, because honey is so different, and does it change from year to year, like if they, so
Low alcohol meads store like beers, but they won't keep all that long, on the order of months. But higher alcohol meads will keep decades or even centuries. So I've never had the pleasure really third-hand anecdotal stuff. But, you know, every once in a while, you read on the web about these, you know, 500-year-old cellars that have been excavated, and there are these rare bottles of wine that go up for auction for tens of thousands of dollars. That's way outside my pay grade. But generally, when they pull a bottle of grape wine that old out of a cellar, it's vinegar. And often it's very nice vinegar. It's like way past balsamic vinegar, right? I mean, it's an incredible Lux vinegar from everything I've heard about, but still, it's vinegar. It's not wine anymore. But when they find meads that are that old, as long as the cork is still intact, it's still a drinkable mead. And I've heard that they're just transcendent. At my favorite Ethiopian restaurant in town, I finally got the proprietress warmed up enough that she exchanged a bottle of homebrew tej with me for one of my meads. And she said that when she was a little girl, her grandmother had a 70-year-old bottle of tej in like, you know, the private part of the cellar that they would just pull out, you know, for weddings and funerals kind of thing. So really, in practice, a good mead will age indefinitely. I mean, certainly on the scale of our lifespans. Absolutely for decades. And that's part of why I chose to silk screen my bottles. I went to a dinner party a few years ago where the theme of the party was, we dug a root cellar, we put some wine in it, and now the labels are gone, let's see what it is. And I thought, you know, if you're going to make a wine that can sit around in a cellar for 30 or 40 years, you ought to put it in a package that can sit around in for 30 or 40 years and still be recognizable when you pull it out, right? So that's why I chose silk screening for our package. Other comments about this mead? Not your favorite one.
Well, you're right, it's not something that you have in large signs, and,
No. You know what you want? You want Rogue Ales, 19 original colonies mead, which is about $7 for a 22-ounce bottle. And there's a meadery.
I was thinking custard.
Okay, let's pour the last one. So this is the one that I make. And this is a completely raw honey mead. I don't heat the honey at all, even to dissolve it in the water. It's just stirred with a pump. And this is a blend of wildflower honey and orange blossom honey. Part of the wildflower honey is from our next door neighbor. My husband did actually help our next door neighbor capture our hive, but it's Ken's hive. It's not our hive, so that's okay. So Ken asks for, you know, advice every once in a while, but Koresh doesn't actually have to go over and handle these. And then this mead also has bee pollen, beeswax, propolis, and royal jelly added to the primary fermentation. So these are additional components in the hive, and kind of my inspiration for doing that is this idea that the first meads wouldn't have been made with the human hand at all, but would have been just an accident of nature. That there's a beehive, somehow it falls and breaks open, some rain falls in it, there's some wild beasts floating around, it ferments, and some really lucky hunter-gatherer just happens to be in the right place at the right time and is thirsty enough to say, okay, I'll try it. And then it's like, yes, we need to get some more of this. And then this batch was cross-flow filtered. And cross-flow filtering is a very high-technology filtering that removes all the yeast and almost all the bacteria. So this should be bottle stable for decades with no added sulfites or preservatives, just with having filtered out the yeast and bacteria.
Is this year's batch?
This was started in December 2012 and bottled in July 2013. 14 months old now. And this is just kind of a straight up middle of the road sweetness level. I'd call it semi-sweet. It's sweet enough that you could push it to a dessert wine, but it's dry enough that you can push it to a table wine as well. It's 11.6% alcohol, so kind of wine strength. It's got a lot of honey in the aroma, but there aren't any added flavors. we've gotten more and more cultivated land, their habitat is less. But even when their habitat was a lot, it's hard to go find a hive, climb a tree, get an 80-pound box or 50-pound box, climb down the tree, haul it all the way back to your garage, as it were, right, to make mead. And it's hard. So honey has always been expensive. But we were just down at a mead-making short course at the University of California, Davis, and one of their agricultural economists had done analysis on costs between beer and wine and mead. And mead has about, so if you normalize for 12% alcohol and normalize for a 750 milliliter package, and you say an average honey is $3 a pound, and I would say in practice good honey is between $3 and $4 a pound, and exceptional honey like Tupelo honey you can pay $8 a pound for, even wholesale, but say $3 a pound. You're at $9 for ingredient costs for mead. You're at about $6 ingredient costs for wine, and you're at about $3 ingredient costs for beer. So it's a substantial difference in ingredient costs.
What's like in this country? What's demand? What's the market look like? Is demand being kind of flat, or is it slowly ramping up? Is it
I have
peaking?
a colleague who says, mead was pretty popular in the 1500s. The last 300 years have been kind of slow for me. But seriously, 10 years ago there were 30 meaderies in the U.S. and now there are about 250. The mead competition is the Mazer Cup competition in Boulder, Colorado every March. Last year the commercial entries were up 60% over the previous year, which was a completely unexpected thing and completely cratered the judging. But 60% more entries in 1 year for commercial meads. I just see it exploding. So in the last year, Mead has had feature articles in Rachel Ray magazine, United Airlines magazine, CBS Sunday Morning News, The New Yorker, Huffington Post. These are pretty mainstream publications. And in Portland alone, we have Bee Thinking and now our meadery that are mead only. I pretty much just drink mead. So I live right in the middle of the Yamhill Carlton AVA. And so I mean, literally, my neighbors make world-class Pinot Noir. And I just decided I'm not going to play in that sandbox. There's too many people doing a beautiful job. And really, I'd rather play with mead anyway. For a long time, I mostly drank Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris and microbrews. Just since November, when we opened the tasting room, and now I've got 40 bottles of open mead in the tasting room, which is like attached to my house. So if you're in my kitchen having lunch at my dining room table, the tasting room is that cart. And there's 40 bottles of open mead there. So actually, one of the most fun part of this whole thing has been that for the last 4 months, I don't have a glass of wine with a meal. I make my meal and I get ready to sit down, and then I just walk in my bedroom slippers into the tasting room, and I get 5 little tasting glasses, and I pour, an ounce in each one, and I come back with 5 different meads. Sweet. And I've been on this food pairing adventure for the last 4 months. and what I realize is, like, seriously, nobody on the planet at this moment, I think, has access to as many different open commercial meads as I do right now. So I started writing a book on mead and food pairings. So that's my pet project at the moment.
Wine is an acquired taste. I mean, the first time you drink wine, you don't fall in love with it.
That's true.
Is that true with mead as well?
Well, you tell me. Actually, apricot and plum meads can be very nice and not too sweet. They have a sourness that Persians and Middle Easterners like, and I think also Chinese and Japanese and Thai people tend to like. So there's a mead that you like. You just have to keep an open mind long enough to find it.
When you open a bottle of mead, how long is it good for open?
That is a very good question and a very important The one that we open from the can, really like a beer or a soda, you kind of need to drink it the same night you open it. The other two that we drank tonight, you could have open for 2 or 3 weeks and they'd still be fine. The Danish mead that I mentioned at the beginning, that's 22% alcohol, I have a bottle in my pantry that I opened 6 months ago and it tastes exactly the same as the champagne style meads, you want to get a real high quality champagne stopper, but if you have one and you keep it in the refrigerator, it'll keep for several weeks.
So is there a secret to making them last longer? Is it a good seal and refrigeration?
Pretty much like, it's the same care and feeding that you'd have for any beer or wine that you wanted to keep around. So if you've got one of those aerosol cans of inert gas that you can get to put an inert gas blanket on top to prevent oxidation, that helps a lot. For carbonated products, you want to have something that seals the carbonation in so it doesn't go flat. And just generally protecting it from oxidation.
Oh, he's been like a while.
Does a meat hangover any better than this? It just feels like sunshine.
I'll be 50. So it's been a while since I've had a hangover, to tell you the truth. I had a lot of hangovers in my 20s, but not so much recently. But what I consistently hear is mead doesn't give you a hangover like red wine or beer does.
Alright.
And I will say, having hung out,
Ad campaign.
having hung out with a lot of mead makers at a lot of mead making parties where everybody's drinking mead, it seems to be like.
Have you ever noticed, would a bee eat this? Would a bee be excited
Yeah,
about mead?
bees like mead.
Okay.
If you're trying to attract bees, put a glass of mead out. They like beeswax even more, so this is just a little bit of bee trivia. Beeswax is not on purpose. But beeswax is way more expensive for bees to produce than honey is. So if you're trying to catch bees, put beeswax where you want to catch them, and they'll come for that for sure. Incidentally, if you're looking for more food pairing stuff, there's a website, academia.edu, and if you go to that website and find me, the first 6 chapters of my meat and food pairing book are there. It's a draft, it's in process. All comments are welcome, so it's not finished yet, but it's there, and I'm actively soliciting comments and actively soliciting recipes and food pairing ideas, so that's there if you want more information. And another great source of information is meadmakers.org, which is the Association of American Mead Makers. No, the American Mead Makers Association, AMMA, which is a professional organization for commercial mead makers, but at this point it's not password protected, and there's a professional journal there, and they profile several different meaderies every time, so if you find the newsletter or the journal, it's published quarterly, and there's lots and lots of stuff in there about mead making, how to make mead, where to find mead, laws about mead, profiles of meaderies, where to get mead, just all kinds of stuff is there. You have been such an engaged audience. I'm so thrilled that now there's what are you, 30 new mead ambassadors ready to go out and convert Portland to mead? It's very exciting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone for attending. We return on March 11th with illustrator and printer Keegan One Foot Winkman of Keegan, Meegan & Co. with his talk, "My Hands Are Going to Fall Off, Hand-Carved Reduction Printmaking." Together, he wrote this in the first person. I tried to change it, it doesn't work that well, but together we will be confused by why Keegan refuses to use modern technology to employ his drawings into print. There will be a presentation of the entire process, start to finish, from initial inspirations, drawing